Hi, my name is Anita Barbie, and I'm representing the Child and Family Policy Institute of California to review with you the in-depth case review and consultation tool that one of our committees has created over the last year. In your packet of information, you have the actual tool, and we're just going to go through the instructions and each of the CPM behaviors and how you can work with your staff to get a better understanding of how they're using the CPM behaviors in their practice with children, youth, families, and community supports, and any areas where they can begin to infuse those behaviors even more. And so this tool is a way to ensure more optimal outcomes for families and to support use of CPM in daily work. You as supervisors are the main source of support for social workers, and this case consultation form hopefully will be able to help you in reinforcing those behaviors in daily practice. What the form does is to guide supervisors as you conduct in-depth reviews of a particular case with a staff member. And what you'll be looking at is the strengths the worker is showing in use of CPM behaviors, any gaps in use of CPM behaviors, and it'll also be just a way to review and an opportunity to coach staff members in how to use CPM behaviors more in their casework. You will explain that this is just a process intended to foster increasing skills in activation of CPM behaviors, in preparation for the case consultation with a staff member. Either you can choose a case and update yourself by reading the case file and remembering all the aspects of the case, or you can ask your staff member to choose a case, particularly one that they may want additional advice or ideas of how to strengthen their work with the family. It's just important to focus on one case at a time with each of your case workers. And the more you understand and familiarize yourself with that case, the better able you will be to understand more about how your worker is or is not utilizing various aspects of CPM behaviors. And then to move from there, we've got a number of questions to probe for understanding, and then a chance to do some coaching. What we hope is that after the staff member presents an overview of the family, that you will then ask questions about some number of the CPM behaviors that you can cover in a particular session with your staff member. You'll ask the questions in order to show how well the staff person has integrated CPM behaviors into their practice, and then you'll rate how much that behavior is demonstrated in their discussion of what they've been doing with the work with children and youth families and community partners. And then you'll be able to coach. So in any given session, you may only cover a few CPM behaviors, and so it may take anywhere from 5 to 10 case consultations to be able to move through all the behaviors. And you may want to obviously repeat that to see if there's any improvement over time in the CPM behaviors. So you may be conducting this kind of a consultation anywhere from 5 to 20 times over the course of a year or 2 years with your each staff member. I know it sounds like there's some time that'll be spent, but our purpose is to have you all understand where your staff are regarding their casework practice, so that when your county decides it's time to assess fidelity to the CPM, your staff will have had time to process, think about deeply each of these behaviors, and have time to work with you on ways to infuse these behaviors into their practice. So that's the purpose of this. It's not a grading tool. It's not anything that's punitive or that should be tied to any evaluation. It's just a chance in a very granular way to work with your staff to improve this aspect and integrate CPM into their work. And hopefully, if all the supervisors in your county are doing this work with all their staff, by the time you get to fidelity assessment, you'll find that most workers on most of their cases are demonstrating the key behaviors that we're expecting as we assess integration of CPM. So after you've done the case consultation and rated the staff members, you could also write notes, and you can have a discussion of ways that that the things that you saw that were strengths, and where areas that you and the worker decide together might be areas for further exploration. And at the end of the form, you'll see that there is a kind of a planning tool for things that your worker can do to strengthen their use of the particular behaviors that were assessed during that time. And again, once they go through this a number of times, they'll begin to get the hang of how to think about practice maybe in a different way than they have previously. And we'll be showing strengths in all the areas. We have another form where another tool, it's more of an observation tool where you'll be observing your staff as they are engaging in things like family team meetings or other kind of interactions with families, that you can watch them do it. And so that's similar, looking at the 10 CPM behaviors, but it's just another angle to get at this kind of understanding of practice and helping your staff improve. Again, when you're engaging in the assessment process for each of the 10 major practice areas in the tool, you'll see that there are 4 bullet points that provide anchors or behavioral anchors for each of these behaviors. And those are the specifics of how this behavior should actually look as people are interacting with the folks that they're serving. And then beside each of those 4 indicators, the rating scale is there of not at all, meaning that this is not something that your social worker does currently, or it's not showing up in the practice as it should. Or you can check the sometimes box, which means that there was some indication that they were using this indicator, and a great extent are consistently using that indicator would be checked in that final box. So we also have a form for the workers to have themselves to do a self-rating on these before they go into this session, or as they just kind of think about all their practice. And they will not only rate themselves on their use of the CPM behaviors, but they'll also rate how much the agency is supporting them in that. And they'll be able to make suggestions for ways you and other parties in the agency can help support use of that particular behavior. So this consultation work will be happening within the mind of the worker, as well as your interaction with the worker as you're talking about cases. And so with all of these pieces, hopefully both your worker and you will have a good sense of where they need to enhance their work. So I'm going to go through each of the 10 behaviors briefly. You've got them on your sheet. This is from the actual form you'll see on this slide. And the first behavior is the first 2 are about foundation work with families. The first is around communicating in a clear and respectful manner, and the 4 indicators you'll see there are mostly focused on language and how you address folks that you're working with, openness in terms of body language, making sure that you're showing deference to leaders, whether that be a tribal leader or another cultural leader in a community that's working with a family, and showing that you're really able to connect, that your workers are able to connect with a diverse set of folks and communicate, attending to those individual differences that the child or the youth or the family shows. And so as you're asking your worker how they are communicating and how they're showing up with families, one question you can ask to unearth more of this, if it doesn't just naturally come out as they're talking about a case, is that you can ask, when you communicate or interact with children, youth, and families, how do you convey respect for their expertise about their own family? And how do you accommodate each family member as you're keeping in mind their background, culture, traits, and life histories? And so what you're looking for in their answer to that question is specific knowledge about each family member, the ways the family members like to be um, addressed or thought about, uh, and ways that they can accommodate or show that they're speaking differently or communicating using multiple modes so that every member of the family is up to speed on what's going on at that particular point in the case. So this is just the first example. The second is another foundation behavior where you're looking at open and honest communication and how timely communication is, and whether the worker is really being clear about the accountability that is expected from families as they're working through the case. That they know, what the timelines are, what the pressures are in terms of accommodating, working through a case plan, and that the worker's also taking account of their own biases and missteps and mistakes that they might have made as they've been working with a particular family. Because it's difficult, especially when you're working across cultural um, groups and norms, to make errors. And so partly what you're looking for is just a real openness with the family, but also towards your own, um, having humility in how you're working and communicating so that improvement can be made. And so to be able to assess if this is happening, again, sometimes when the worker is talking through the case and describing a family or describing what they're doing with the family, these kinds of things may come out of the kind of messages that they're giving. And, depending on where they are in the case, whether things are being done in a timely fashion. Again, if you've looked at the case, you'll know how they're doing on that. And you can probe if they're off their timing or if they're having a difficult time communicating or connecting with a certain family member, or help them through any kind of misstep that they've had. So some of the questions to get at this, if it doesn't just come out naturally as they describe a case, is to say, if they're speaking with a family now, what would you think the family would say about why children are involved? So that's kind of an interesting way for them to kind of almost step back and think about not just what they've said, but do they think the family has got it? Have they communicated in a way that's so clear that they think the family could articulate it just the way they have? And so again, what you'll want to do is take note as they're describing a case, if any biases emerge or if any missteps happen, so that you can do what you normally do in supervision, which is to give some feedback or some ideas of how they might do that differently in the future, how they might have done it differently at that time, and to address any policy or practice issues. So you can use that coaching as a part of this as well. Obviously, as I mentioned, you can look at the case record, and you might even check with the family to see, periodically check with some of the families as you're going through these cases to see how the family is perceiving working with your worker, and if that aligns with what the worker is telling you. The next two behaviors really focus on engagement, and this is looking at, again, how they're connecting or partnering with children, youth, young adults, and families. Are they reaching out? Are they expressing a belief that the families have a capacity to safely care for children? Are they focusing in on those strengths of the family? Are they figuring out ways to build on those strengths? Are they using encouragement to help move families along? Are they, open to learning more about the family and their culture and their community, and how those strengths might make the case, move forward better? So some of the questions you can ask is like, how does each member of the family like to be contacted? When, where should meetings occur? Again, you're testing for knowledge of the family. How does the family know that you believe in their capacity to safely care for their children, or that you're working towards that? uh, tell me about a time when you feel like you've been really able to connect to someone in this family. Tell that story. So those are, again, are ways to kind of put some meat on the bones of how they're thinking about the family and how they're communicating. The second engagement behavior really focuses on identifying and engaging family members who are important to the child, the youth, or the young adult. Uh, Trying to probe for additional relationships and significant others early in. But even if you're working in an ongoing case and the worker is new to the family, you've already had an investigation, maybe even done some family finding, but at any point in the case, you can continue to probe for other relatives or other important, significant others in the life of a child who might be able to help the family support them or support the child as they're moving through our system. The other aspects of this are, searching for family members, working to identify fathers if that hasn't already happened, contacting these cultural brokers. Um, Again, some questions you can ask is tell me about efforts you've made to locate the father in cases where that hasn't happened. Who in the extended family or the network is the family identified to step in as part of the safety network? How are we utilizing that contact? How does that fit into the larger system of care and help that we're hoping for in the family? What are you doing to include those significant people in family team meetings, etc.? And again, talking about current relationships that are showing to make a difference in the case. The next two behaviors in the CPM are around assessment. Assessment is ongoing, whether you're in the investigative stage or case planning stage, or even if you're moving to close a case, you're still assessing to see if safety has been achieved and if we can move to permanency. And so in this first one, the behavior focuses on listening and demonstrating that someone cares about the thoughts and experiences of each of the persons that they're working with. So, using some of the tools, for example, that are in SOP, like asking the children about their worries and wishes and where they feel safe and where they want to live, or just infusing trauma-informed approaches to acknowledging and validating expressions of anger or feelings of loss, or asking the family what's working well and honoring those important cultural leaders in the family, or reflecting on those restraints uh, and making sure that there are goals for each of the children in the family. So those are ways to show this part of assessment. Some of the questions here that you can probe for, if this doesn't come out naturally as they're talking about the case, is to ask about a time when the family shared frustration or anger or sadness about having child welfare in their lives. Another good question to get at this is, how did you react to the emotional expression? How did that affect subsequent encounters? Again, what you're looking for is understanding of centrality of family, expertise about their own family, and patience and understanding of the trauma that they're going through just being involved with our system. Certainly, you could look at the case plan for some of the language used about the family, and you can also, if you're working in an ongoing way, ask about showing the case plan and how voices and family are reflected. The second assessment really examines the use of safety and risk assessment tools such as the CANS, and incorporating all that information into any kind of permanency planning that's happening. Again, regardless of where you are in the case, permanency planning is happening all along. And the kind of indicators are, how often there's been check-ins, how often that the family members know what to expect in terms of the assessment process, what tools they're using to amplify the voices of children and youth, what they're doing in terms of helping the family express underlying needs and safety concerns that they have, and then applying information to all assessments and reassessments through that cultural lens, and especially as they're using this, the CANS tool, to make sure that that family voice comes out clearly. And so here are some of the probing questions you can ask are about how the family has described their strengths and needs to you in their words, what you and the family have agreed needs to change so that we can get out of their lives. And there's a number of prompts there. And then what you can do to help facilitate families' progress towards meeting their goals or towards reunification if it's an out-of-home care case. The next set of behaviors really focus on teaming, and you're looking to see how well the worker is teaming with the family or building a supportive team around the family, so informal social supports as well as formal from professionals that are working with them on their particular goals and tasks in the case plan, and how culture might affect those, and getting permission to reach out to these folks and having them be part of the family team meetings. And so if it's not a parent, asking specifically who are the advocates for this family and how do they show up at these meetings. Is the CANS assessment tool being done on each child, and how's that impacting the case plan, so that do you have a team around each child, not just the family as a whole? What role culture plays in participating in the team? Who does the family feel is missing from the team? Who do you feel like is missing from participating in the team? And then in out-of-home care situations, depending on the role that your staff member plays, you can ask different aspects around preparing for placement in resource homes, preparing those families to receive the child, etc. So some of this depends on where you are in a case and what kind of casework your person does. The second teaming question really focuses in on facilitating the teaming process and engaging the team as they plan and make decisions, and supporting the child, youth, young adult, or family. And then those four indicators really hone in on, is there a shared understanding of what outcomes are trying to be changed at the end of the case? Any kind of legal or policy constraints that may limit the options the family has, assisting the team to work through conflicts or facilitate critical thinking or mutual exploration. How well is your worker really encouraging the participation of children and of these cultural brokers in the family's lives, and the clear role they can play in strengthening safety and support. So the kinds of questions here that you can probe for to see how well these kinds of indicators are occurring in the case is asking about steps to communicate about safety, permanency, and well-being, describing a disagreement that has happened among family members and how you've helped support them in resolving that or moving them along so that they can make decisions together, connections that they've made to support the family to reach case goals, and any services the family is accessing, and how culturally competent those services are. And then finally, the final two behaviors really focus in on services and supports and transitions. The first is how to help the family build behavioral plans to assist in achieving safety and healing trauma and leading to permanency. And some questions that can kind of get at those four indicators there are, if I was speaking to the family, would they describe having their current needs for food, shelter, or medication met that could impact their case plan progress? So that really gets at a very granular level about how we're working to meet the needs that the family feels are really important, not just what we think is important. And some questions about specificity of how people are working in partnership. And then finally, this behavior really focuses in on working with the folks to assess services, to monitor the progress happening in service delivery, adapting the plan as needed, and to meet evolving needs as things arise in the family. And this is the chance for folks to advocate, to stay up to date on plan progress, to adapt what's needed, what supports are needed for the family, and to help them navigate significant transitions. And there are a number of questions here that can get at each of these points so that you can understand how well they're celebrating success with families and how they're transitioning to the next phase of the case. Now, again, you probably won't have the ability to go through all of the behaviors in one case in one sitting with your caseworker. As you see, there's a lot of detail here. Maybe that you can get through a couple, maybe do them in blocks of foundation or engagement or teaming, assessment, etc. And maybe do it 5 times with them across different cases and then repeat it so that you're every month over the course of a year talking to your workers, each one of them, to get an in-depth view of working with different families. And you begin to see trends across families and show improvement over time as they are integrating these behaviors into their practice. You see there's a lot of repetition even across our behaviors. So that helps. There are some very strong themes coming across there that hopefully can help the workers find ways to integrate it. The final thing that can be a kind of a development area. There's a sheet at the end of the tool that you can kind of summarize what you did in that day and how you are wanting your folks to integrate their learning from that day into their ongoing practice and plan for any activities to enhance any of these behaviors that have been covered in the session, and ask, collaboratively what you or others in the agency can do to support their needs as to how they can increase use of that CPM behavior in their practice, and just any other kind of discoveries, so that, because this is all a learning process of reinforcing. Thank you so much for your time and attention as we've gone through this case consultation tool. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Dana Fabella at CFPIC, and she or one of our team will be glad to talk with you further. Have a great time working with your staff on CPM behaviors. Bye-bye.